Have you ever noticed how no matter what channel you turn to or what app you scroll, everyone seems to be talking about the same stories? Well, that's not by coincidence. That's what we call agenda setting theory. The idea that media doesn't just tell us what to think, but they tell us what to think about. Welcome back to Communication Campus. All right, so I'm your host, Dr. Malynnda Stewart, and today we are exploring agenda setting theory, one of the most important and enduring ideas in media research. This was developed by Maxwell McComb and This was developed by Maxwell McCombs and Donald Shaw. And this theory explains how media shape public priorities by influencing what we pay attention to and what we don't. Now, agenda setting theory was first identified and really introduced in 1972 based on research during the 1968 presidential election. And McCombs and Shaw found a strong correlation between the issues that dominated news coverage and issues voters were saying were the most important to them. And they concluded that the news doesn't tell people how to think. It tells them what to think about. In other words, it sets the public agenda. And if you saw my other episode, I talked about how media isn't the brain, it's the neck. And this is where this really comes into play, because the neck turns your head of what to look at and what to ignore over there. It's kind of like a three-ring circus. You have spotlights on one part of the circus to distract you from the other things that are happening. Now, agenda setting rests on a simple but powerful process. First, we have the media agenda. Journalists, editors, producers decide what issues are actually going to be covered. Next, we have the public agenda. Audiences come to see those issues as the most important problems in society because that's what everybody's talking about. So clearly, it must be the most important. And finally, we have the policy agenda. Policymakers respond to this public concern, which is often shaped by the media attention in the first place. This cycle shows how media, audiences, and institutions interact to define what's important. Now, over time, scholars have expanded the agenda setting theory into two levels. First level agenda setting, which is how we identify what issues are important. So, for example, climate change, healthcare, the economy. Then we have the second level agenda setting, known as attribute agenda setting. And this is what focuses on how are those issues framed and discussed. So, for example, is climate change about science, policy, or personal responsibility? This second level overlaps with framing theory, but agenda setting focuses on the salience, what's brought to our attention, and not necessarily how it's being evaluated. So, in today's media environment, agenda setting doesn't just happen through traditional news outlets. It's shaped by algorithms, influencers, and obviously the audiences themselves. So, we can think about social media platforms, and those trending topics are really based on algorithms that now function as the agenda setters. They decide what surfaces in our feeds and what sinks to the bottom. We also have networked agenda setting. The journalists, the politicians, the citizens co-create public attention through retweets and shares. And lastly, we have selective exposure. People curate their own agendas by choosing which sources to reference and which ones are going to reinforce their existing interests and beliefs. In other words, agenda setting is no longer top down, it's networked and participatory. That is it, my friends. This agenda setting theory explains how media influences what we think about. The issues most visible to media become the issues people discuss, and often the issues policymakers are choosing to act on. And in today's fragmented media world, agenda setting happens everywhere, from our cable news to your TikTok, anything that's showing up on your For You page. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Communication Campus. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Malynnda Stewart, and this actually wraps up our series on communication theories. Now, yes, there are tons of additional theories, but these are the key basic ones. Now, together, especially these last few episodes, we've explored how media shapes meaning, perception, and power in our lives. So until next time, remember, attention is influence. And in the world of communication, whoever sets the agenda shapes the conversation. I am so glad that you have been with me for any and or all of these episodes. And if there's something else you would like to see unpacked and talked about on this channel that's regarding communication, please drop me a line in the comments. I'm always looking for new ideas. And as always, keep communicating.